Good evening, Youth United. Guys, I am here for the last time, and I'm incredibly excited. It's going to be a great time. Coleman's actually going to come on next week, and he's going to finally close us out on our series, What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. But today, I'm actually going to start out by talking about one of my favorite movies. So you guys think of, I don't know, a couple of maybe your favorite movies. So mine growing up were actually happened to be 3 Mel Gibson movies. I don't know why my dad was a fan. I think that's just what got me to be a fan. So it was Patriot, Braveheart, and We Were Soldiers. And recently with my wife, I actually started watching The Patriot. And, you know, if you've never seen it, it's in the Revolutionary War, and it's about a dad who doesn't want his sons to go to war, and he refuses to fight the British because he's seen war and he doesn't want it. And then one of his sons ends up actually getting killed. And then you see him go absolutely berserk, and you see him go from this super, super nice guy to a guy who is like incredibly dangerous, and it's really, really cool. I love the movie. But that's actually kind of one of the things that makes a movie great, right? Is how much we like the main characters. See, producers create characters we can get attached to by giving us a deeper look into both the good and the bad parts of their life. Seeing both helps us, it helps us feel for them, right? And it makes us actually care about what happens to them and helps us like them even more. Movies also show us somewhat of what happens in a character's life by creating a backstory, right? Which is a way of letting us know some things that have happened to the character before what's currently going on. So, for example, maybe the movie centers around a dad saving his daughter, kind of like Taken, right? But the backstory shows us that their relationship had a lot of brokenness in the past. Or maybe the movie centers around a superhero defeating his greatest enemy, but we discover that they used to be great friends before something divided their relationship, kind of like Captain America, Civil War. Right? So understanding the backstory helps make a story more complex, more interesting and compelling. But sometimes introducing these things can seem random. So like, say when the dad is in the middle of a chase to find his daughter's kidnappers, and all of a sudden it switches. And the movie flashes back to a scene where he and his daughter are arguing in the kitchen. And at first you're kind of like, okay, wait, what does this have to do with anything, with the movie? Chances are you've probably also felt that way just living in your own life. There are moments in our real life stories that make us ask the same questions. And I am currently asking these questions like, what's happening? And what's the point of me even going through this? And I ask myself those questions all the time, and I'm sure you do too. We're talking about difficulties, right? Pain, struggle, problems, the things that will be a part of our backstory for the rest of our lives. But as for now, they're in our current story. And we're in the middle of them. It's kind of rough. So for the past few weeks, we've been talking about this question: what do you do when you don't actually know what to do? And today, we're talking about what to do when people make fun of you. I mean, probably three of my closest friends got bullied at some point, either in middle school or high school. Maybe you have a friend pass away, like my friend Brandon, who committed suicide. Maybe your learning disability makes everything more difficult. Maybe your parents' divorce is killing you on the inside, or your self-harm habit gets way out of control. Or, especially during COVID, this is actually very applicable. Someone you love gets really, really sick, or has been really, really sick. In other words, the really heavy stuff, the real stuff, the painful stuff. Before we can even ask the question, what do I do? We often ask ourselves the question, why? Why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this of all people, and why is it happening now? Just like a movie that flashes back to a scene that doesn't seem to make any sense at the moment, difficulties can make us feel the exact same way. Difficulties oftentimes feel incredibly random, pointless, and a lot of times completely unnecessary. And sometimes we see the point after the fact, not always, when it's a part of our backstory. For example, maybe you have a broken friendship, but looking back, you realize that the friendship led you to make some bad decisions, and you may not have liked that version of yourself very much. So even though you felt bad at the time, you're now actually glad that it happened. Sometimes we even see the point in the moment, right? Those rare few times where you actually see the point while the difficulties are happening. So, for example, maybe you found yourself struggling in band, right? And it was on you. You weren't putting in the effort. You got called out by your section leader and started doing extra rehearsals. And you got better. And it wasn't fun. It's never fun getting called out on the floor, ever. But it was for the best. And you got better. It's nice when that happens. But most of the time, things that don't feel good seem completely pointless. And we've all had an experience that hurts and that feels pointless in the moment, whether it was not making a team, not getting the part in the musical, going through drama with friends or family. I mean, we've all asked ourselves, why me, when we go through these type of things. And if you're like me, there's usually not many good answers in the moment. Rarely any. And what's worse, in real life, unlike the movies, our difficult circumstances usually don't get a pretty bow tie on them as we walk through them. Sometimes they don't feel like they have a resolution. The outcome may not turn out how we want them to in those times, and that's why it can be really difficult for us to see any point behind our pain, to find hope despite the hurt, or to find the determination to keep going despite the difficulties. But when we find life confusing or difficult, we can actually learn what we can do by looking to people who have handled similar situations, which brings us back to the life of Joseph. If you guys have just turned in, this is your first time, we've been going over the story of Joseph the past 3 weeks. This is our 4th week, and we've been looking at some of the events in Joseph's life. Now, the account of his journey is actually found in the Old Testament in the Bible, which basically means he lived way before Jesus, right? And here's the recap. Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers. Ouch. He was taken to a foreign country, which was Egypt, where he was forced to work for a high-powered official, which, all right. And then he was falsely accused of doing something by that high official's wife that he didn't do, and he was thrown into prison. He went from being a free man to a slave to a prisoner. If anyone had earned the right to ask the question, what's the point, Why is all of this happening to me? It was Joseph. And that's where we pick up. See, Joseph is in jail for a crime he didn't commit, and here he actually makes some new friends. So, let's start out. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with the two officials. The chief cupbearer and the chief baker put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the same prison where Joseph was confined. This is Genesis chapter 40, verses 1 through 3. So Pharaoh is he's the boss of all of Egypt. They kind of considered Pharaoh to be a god. So if he got mad at you and he wanted to throw you in a prison, that's where you're going to go, even if you hadn't done anything. He just might have had a bad day. He wants you in prison. No one's going to question it. You're gone. And that's what happened to these two guys. They were thrown in prison with Joseph for no reason. They hadn't actually done anything wrong. And after they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night. And each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Genesis chapter 40, verses 4 through 8. So there's a lot happening there, right? So Joseph is in prison for a crime he did not commit. That is a very difficult situation. But Joseph, even in that difficult situation, continued to honor God, continued to do the next right thing. The men told Joseph their dreams, and with God's help, Joseph told them what they meant. And then what Joseph said would happen actually happened. It came true. He interpreted their dreams completely correct. And based on the dream the chief cupbearer had, Joseph said he would be restored to a favorable position. And he was. However, as for the other guy, the chief baker, Joseph said he would not have the same luck. And he didn't, which sucks. He stayed in prison. So listen, the rest of the story, what happened here was just as crazy. It's wild, right? But you think that given Joseph was in jail, Joseph had done to help the cupbearer out, even though he was in prison, the cupbearer probably appreciate it, right? I mean, you remember the guy that interpreted your dreams correctly after you get out. And it would have made a lot of sense for that guy to get out and to speak up, right? To say, "Thank you, Mr. Pharaoh, for helping me out. I just want you to know that while I was locked up, I was locked up with this guy who actually interpreted my dream to absolute perfection. And I know that you have dreams that you need interpreted, so I thought I'd tell you about this guy." But it didn't happen that way. The story tells us that the cupbearer forgot all about Joseph when he got out. He got out of jail and he just simply went on with his life. But over time, as Joseph was waiting in jail for his friend to actually remember him, who knows how he didn't, he realized that not only did his friend forget what he did to help him, but he had nothing left to him but his thoughts. So I'm sure because that all he could do was like, "Hey, I wonder I wonder if he's told Pharaoh about me, or I wonder if he's talked to anyone about the dream I interpreted that came true. And because he was only left to his thoughts, I'm sure he was tempted to wonder, what was the point of all that? What was the point of me interpreting his dream? My life didn't get any better at all. Has God forgotten about me? I thought I did what was right, and I'm still here stuck in a jail cell, which I didn't deserve in the first place. But then, 2 years later, 2 whole years, Pharaoh had 2 dreams that troubled him deeply. The type of trouble that you lose sleep over. And he desperately searched for someone on his staff who could interpret them, but no one could. And that's when the cupbearer remembered. Joseph. So Pharaoh called for Joseph, who interpreted the dream with incredible accuracy. And as a result, eventually, Joseph was made second in charge of all Egypt. I mean, I don't know what it's like 2 years in a jail cell, but if I had to wait that 2 years to become second in charge of all Egypt, probably worth the wait, right? And under Joseph's leadership as second in charge, Egypt survived a terrible famine, which eventually put Egypt in a position to save Joseph's family. You know, the family, the brothers that sold him into slavery. Yeah, that family. And other people from his homeland who were actually suffering from that famine. It was 2 full years before the cupbearer even remotely remembered Joseph or his name. And even when Joseph was promoted to a position of incredible power, he was still living in a foreign land. You know, it's still not really his home. So, I mean, it's not like Joseph was able to go home as a free man, and Joseph was still second in command under Pharaoh. Which, like I said, Pharaoh was kind of like a god. So, I mean, if Pharaoh had a bad day and decided that he wanted Joseph dead, he could still snap his fingers and it would still happen. So, did this make his life perfect or easy? No, not even close, really. But when we see the big picture and understand the context to his backstory, we can see that Joseph's challenging circumstances uniquely positioned him to do something super incredible, something great. You know, Joseph had to wait 2 whole years in a prison cell. And all the good things that happened in Joseph's world didn't make those bad things okay. Being promoted to second in command didn't undo the challenges he faced leading up to that. But at the same time, those difficult circumstances positioned him and prepared him for something great, something that only he could do. And the same thing is true for you, and the same thing is true for me. Hard things can happen in your life, and they're going to happen. And it's really important to remember that just because something happens doesn't mean it was something God did to you or wanted for you. Because of sin, things that aren't fair, that don't make any sense at all, I mean, that's the way life is. People hurt each other and they create a system of hurt. But when it seems like it's impossible that anything good can come out of a situation, remember, God is really good at doing the impossible. So check this out, right? And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose, Romans 8:28. And I'm going to read that one more time because I love this verse. Romans 8, verse 28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. See, it may not seem to make things all better, and it may not even make sense yet, but God is in the business of taking our hurt, our difficulties, our pain, and redeeming them. That means even if it was done in evil and meant for evil in our lives, he can use it for good, and not only for us, but for others. In other words, when you don't know what to do, remember that your problems can position you for a purpose. This doesn't mean we can tie a bow on every bad thing that happens to us. It doesn't mean everything is going to be fixed and going to go back to how it was before everything bad happened. It just means we can leave room for God to tell a new story in our hard circumstances. It means we can have confidence in God's ability to redeem things, to know that good can come from the bad. It means that the bad stuff doesn't get the last word. The hardest and the worst things we experience aren't the end of our story. In fact, they can be made into something and a part of something that's a lot more. So when we go through pain and we can't see the purpose yet, here are some things that can help us get a bigger perspective. 1, remember that no one else has your life story. Your difficult circumstances are not fun, but they are unique to you. And they put you in a position to learn and to grow and to discover things no one else can. God is using your tough stuff in ways you can't imagine because they have shaped you in ways no one else has been shaped. That's not going to make it any easier, but it may give you a perspective or a way to see it differently. And number 2, remember that your story can interact with other people's stories. Although no one else has your life story, many people do face similar circumstances, and you could be a voice to help them through their own challenges and their own pain. I mean, a help you would not have been able to provide if you hadn't gone through it yourself. So when you go through family drama, you can help people who are going through family drama. When you go through a hard breakup, you can actually understand how someone else feels when they're going through the same thing. When you deal with a sickness or illness or injury, whatever it is, you can encourage people who are going through the same thing. And when you have had big doubts and questions in your faith, you can be a safe place to talk about those things for people who are asking questions of their own. You can even become a person who looks around and sees other people's struggles and says, "Oh, you feel that? Hey, me too, actually. Oh, you experienced that? I've been there. Can I tell you my experience? The truth is, the next best thing to have something fixed for us is having someone who has been through it too. Someone to actually walk along our mess with us. That's one of the reasons we make sure everybody here has a small group leader. The leaders in this room right, in this Zoom room, they've been through a lot of stuff. And I know some of their stories personally. They have been through a lot of stuff. And probably more than you realize. And if you're going through something, one of the best people to talk to is your leader, because I bet you they've been through something similar. Even if they've never experienced your exact situation, they will have a better perspective because of all that they've experienced. See, Joseph went through pain that felt absolutely pointless. But when we actually get to see his whole backstory, we see that God used his problems and positioned him for a purpose. God took his impossibly bad situation, sold to slavery, given to a master whose wife lied and put him in a prison, and used it to create an unimaginable, amazing thing down the road. And we're going to talk even more about it next week and when Coleman comes. But for now, imagine if he could do the same thing with you. What if God used your painful situation to position you for something amazing that you haven't even imagined yet? And what if the first step is simply asking for his help? Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you just again for through all this crazy stuff, even having the ability to meet, even if it's not in person, Father. But I thank you for technology, that it's come this far that we can still talk to people. That's so important, not to feel alone. And I pray that through whatever hard circumstances people are going through right now, that they remember that you are always there and that you can do the absolute impossible out of those bad situations and turn them into something that we never see, but something that's always great. And I also just pray, Father, that we can meet soon. I know everyone's getting antsy inside their homes. I know I'm getting antsy inside my home, and I love being able to see people. So we pray this in your name. Amen. Okay, so guys, there is a link down below in the video. If you are new, click that link. You'll go on a Zoom call. Either I'll be there or Coleman. We'll get to know you a little bit. We'll put you in a small group. But if you're not new, you guys know where you're going. Have a wonderful rest of your guys' nights. Thank you so much.